The drought that brought him home. Eliza Crow had three things left in her cabin that afternoon: half a canteen of water, a crust of hardtack, and the loaded rifle she kept by the door. The drought had killed everything else: her garden, her hope, nearly her will to stay. Then she heard it, a child's cry, thin as smoke, drifting through air so hot it shimmered like glass. She found the little girl face down in the dust, lips cracked and bleeding, and the man crawling toward her on his hands and knees. Eliza gave them her last water. She didn't know she'd just saved the richest man in Montana Territory. Before we begin, if you're listening from anywhere in the world, drop a comment with your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. Now settle in, because what started in the burning heat of summer became something none of them could have predicted. The sun that summer didn't just shine, it punished. Eliza Crow stood in the doorway of her cabin, squinting at the shimmering horizon where the mountains should have been. Heat rose in waves off the cracked earth, blurring the line between sky and ground until the whole world looked like it was melting. The creek behind her cabin had gone dry 3 weeks ago. The well was down to mud. Even the birds had stopped singing. She was 32 years old and felt like she'd lived 100 summers. The cabin sat in a high valley, tucked between pine-covered ridges that used to run green all the way to the snow line. Now the pines looked gray, their needles brittle as bone. Eliza had built this life with her husband Thomas 7 years ago, back when the land still held promise. They'd planted a garden, raised chickens, talked about children. Then the fever took him. A year later, their son, barely 2 years old, followed. She'd stayed because leaving meant admitting it was all for nothing. Her hands were chapped and scarred, her dress patched in 4 places. She wore her dark hair pulled back in a braid that hadn't seen a proper washing in days. Water was too precious now. Everything was rationed. Everything was dying. Eliza wiped the sweat from her forehead and turned back inside. The cabin was small. 1 room with a loft, a stone fireplace, a table she'd made herself. The air inside was stifling. She moved to the water barrel in the corner and dipped a tin cup, measuring carefully. Half full. She drank it slowly, feeling each swallow like a small betrayal of tomorrow. Then she heard it. Faint. Distant. A sound that didn't belong to wind or wildlife. A child crying. Eliza froze, cup halfway to her lips. She set it down and stepped outside again, listening hard. The heat pressed against her like a wall, but she held still, filtering out the buzz of insects and the rustle of dying grass. There it was again. Weak. Desperate. She grabbed the rifle from beside the door and started walking. The ground crunched under her boots. Dust rose with every step, coating her skirt, her arms, the back of her neck. She moved toward the tree line, toward the sound, her heart pounding harder than it should. Out here, sounds carried strange. Out here, you didn't always find what you were looking for. She pushed through a stand of parched junipers and stopped. A little girl lay crumpled in the dirt. Eliza's breath caught. The child couldn't have been more than 5 or 6, her blonde hair matted with dust and sweat, her small body motionless except for the faint rise and fall of her chest. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her dress, once fine, now filthy, clung to her like a rag. "Jesus," Eliza whispered. She dropped to her knees and turned the girl over gently. The child's skin was burning. Her eyes fluttered but didn't open. Eliza brushed the hair from her face and felt for a pulse. Weak, but there. "Hey," Eliza said softly. "Hey, sweetheart. Can you hear me?" No response. Then she heard something else. A low, rasping sound. Movement. Eliza's head snapped up. A man was crawling toward them. He was on his hands and knees, dragging himself across the dirt like a wounded animal. His hat was gone. His shirt was soaked through with sweat and dust. His face was sun-scorched, his lips split, his eyes wild and unfocused. "Help her!" he gasped. "Please, help her!" His voice cracked on the last word, and he collapsed forward, barely catching himself. Eliza's mind raced. She didn't know these people, didn't know where they'd come from, or why they were out here in the middle of nowhere with no water, no horses, no help, but she knew what dying looked like. And they were dying. "Can you walk?" she asked sharply. The man's head lolled. He tried to push himself up and failed. "I'll take that as a no." Eliza slung the rifle over her shoulder and crouched beside the child. She scooped her up, light as kindling, and stood. The girl's head fell against her shoulder, her breath shallow and hot. "Listen to me," Eliza said to the man. "My cabin's a quarter mile that way. You follow me, or you die here. Understand?" He nodded weakly. "Then move." She didn't wait. She turned and started walking, the child cradled against her chest. Behind her, she heard the man grunt and struggle to his feet. She didn't look back. If he couldn't keep up, that was his choice. But she heard him, stumbling, breathing hard, falling once and cursing, getting up again. By the time she reached the cabin, her arms were shaking and her lungs burned. She kicked the door open and laid the girl on her bed, the only bed, then turned and grabbed the water barrel. She didn't think. She just poured. She soaked a rag and pressed it to the child's forehead, her neck, her wrists. The girl's eyes fluttered again. A small broken sound escaped her throat. "You're all right," Eliza murmured. "You're all right now." The door banged open. The man staggered inside and collapsed against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor. His chest heaved. His eyes were barely open. Eliza grabbed the tin cup and filled it. She crossed the room and shoved it into his hands. "Drink slow," she said. "You drink too fast, you'll bring it back up." He nodded and drank, his hands trembling so badly water spilled down his chin. She watched him for a moment, then turned back to the girl. She kept the rag cool, kept wiping her down, kept whispering things she wasn't sure the child could hear. Minutes passed. The man's breathing evened out. Eliza finally allowed herself to look at him properly. He was younger than she'd thought, maybe mid-30s, though the sun and exhaustion had aged him. Dark hair, dark eyes, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. His clothes were good quality, or had been before the desert tried to kill him. There was a wedding ring on his left hand. "What's her name?" Eliza asked quietly. He looked up, his eyes focusing on her for the first time. "May," he said hoarsely. "Her name is May." "And yours?" He hesitated, just for a second. "Caleb. Caleb Hart." The name didn't mean anything to Eliza. She nodded and turned back to the girl. "What happened to you?" Caleb swallowed, his throat working hard. "We were visiting a grave, my wife's grave, up in the hills. On the way back, a heat storm came through, wind, dust, everything. Spooked the horses, they bolted, took the packs with them." He paused, his voice breaking. "We've been walking for 2 days." 2 days. In this heat. With a child. Eliza didn't say what she was thinking, that he was a damn fool for bringing a little girl out here in the first place. She just kept working, kept cooling May's skin, kept watching for signs of improvement. "She gonna be all right?" Caleb asked. "I don't know," Eliza said honestly. "Heat stroke's tricky. She's young, that helps, but she's bad off." "What can I do?" "Sit there and don't die. That's all I need from you right now." He almost smiled. Almost. Eliza worked through the afternoon. She gave May water, a few drops at a time, waiting to see if she'd keep it down. She did. Eliza soaked her dress, changed the rags, kept her as cool as she could in a cabin that felt like an oven. Outside, the sun burned on, relentless. By evening, May's fever had broken just enough that her eyes opened. "Papa?" she whispered. Caleb was beside her in an instant. He took her small hand in both of his face crumpling with relief. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here. I'm thirsty." Eliza handed him the cup, and he helped May drink, his hand still shaking. The girl drank a little, then lay back, her eyes drifting closed again. "She's resting now," Eliza said. "That's good." Caleb nodded, but he didn't let go of May's hand. Eliza stepped outside to breathe. The heat was finally easing as the sun dropped toward the mountains. She sat on the porch step and let her head fall back against the doorframe. Her water was nearly gone. Her food wouldn't last another week, and now she had 2 strangers in her cabin, one of them half dead and the other not much better. She should have left them, but she hadn't, and now she'd have to live with that. The next morning, May was stronger. Not well, but better. She sat up in bed and asked for bread. Eliza gave her the last of the hardtack, softened in water, and watched her eat slowly, carefully. Caleb was up too, moving stiffly, his face still gaunt and sunburned. He stood by the window, looking out at the scorched valley. How far to the nearest town? He asked. 15 miles south, place called Ridgewood. You got a horse? Eliza shook her head. Sold her last month. Caleb turned, his expression troubled. Then how do you... I manage. He studied her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his eyes. Understanding, maybe. Or pity. She didn't want either. We'll leave as soon as May's strong enough, he said. I won't impose on you longer than... You'll leave when I say you can leave, Eliza interrupted. That girl's not ready to walk 15 miles in this heat. You want to kill her for real this time? Go ahead. But you're not doing it on my watch. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Thank you, he said quietly. Eliza didn't answer. She turned back to the stove where she was boiling the last of the dried beans. Over the next few days, a strange rhythm settled over the cabin. May grew stronger, bit by bit. She was a quiet child, watchful, with her father's dark eyes and a seriousness that didn't belong on a face so young. She didn't ask many questions, but she watched everything Eliza did. How she rationed the water, how she cooked, how she moved through the small space with the efficiency of someone who'd lived alone too long. Caleb helped where he could. He fixed the loose hinge on the door, patched a crack in the chimney stone. He didn't talk much, and Eliza didn't push. But sometimes, in the evenings, when May was asleep and the heat had finally broken, they'd sit outside and share the silence. One night Caleb spoke. I lost my wife 2 years ago, he said, his voice low. Childbirth. The baby didn't make it either. Eliza's hands stilled. She'd been mending a tear in her sleeve, but now she just held the needle. I'm sorry, she said. May was 3 when it happened, too young to understand, but she knew something was gone. He paused, staring out at the dark hills. I thought if I brought her to the grave, if she could see it, say goodbye, maybe it would help. Did it? I don't know, maybe. Or maybe I just needed to go myself. Eliza understood that. She'd visited Thomas's grave every week for a year after he died. Then she'd stopped. It hadn't brought him back. It hadn't made the grief any smaller. I lost my husband and my son, she said, her voice flat. Fever took them both. 3 years ago. Caleb looked at her, and for the first time she saw something other than exhaustion in his face. Recognition, the kind that comes from shared pain. Why'd you stay? He asked. Because leaving meant it didn't matter. That they didn't matter. She set the mending aside. Staying was the only thing I could do that still felt like love. Caleb nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. I know that feeling. They didn't speak again that night, but something had shifted. Mom. On the 5th day, riders appeared on the horizon. Eliza saw them first, 3 men on horseback, moving slow and deliberate across the valley floor. They were still a ways off, but they were coming straight toward the cabin. Caleb, she called. He came outside, May at his side. He followed Eliza's gaze and went very still. You know them? She asked. No. But the way he said it made her hand move toward the rifle. The riders came closer. They stopped about 50 yards out, sitting their horses in a loose line. The man in the center was older, thick-shouldered, with a hard face and a marshal's badge pinned to his vest. The other 2 looked like ranch hands, armed, watchful. Caleb Hart! The man called out. Caleb stepped forward, his hand resting on May's shoulder. That's me. The man nudged his horse a few steps closer. Name's Wilder. I've been hired to bring you and the girl back to the valley. There's people worried about you. I appreciate the concern, Caleb said evenly, but we're fine. Didn't look fine when your horses came back without you. We had some trouble. It's handled. Wilder's eyes flicked to Eliza, then back to Caleb. You've been staying here. She saved our lives. That's so. Wilder's tone didn't change, but something cold crept into his expression. Well, we'll take you back now. You and the girl. Get you home safe. We'll leave when we're ready, Caleb said. Wilder's smile didn't reach his eyes. That wasn't a request, Mr. Hart. Eliza stepped forward, the rifle loose in her hands but visible. He said they're fine, she said quietly. You heard him. Wilder looked at her like she was something stuck to his boot. This ain't your business, woman. It is when you're on my land. One of the other men snorted. Wilder raised a hand, silencing him. We're not here to cause trouble, Wilder said. We're here to bring Mr. Hart home, and we're going to do that. No, Caleb said, his voice hard now. You're not. Wilder's jaw tightened. For a moment, no one moved. Then he turned his horse, the other two following. We'll be back, he said over his shoulder. And next time, we won't be asking. They rode off, dust rising in their wake. Eliza lowered the rifle and looked at Caleb. Who the hell are you? She asked. Caleb's face was pale. He glanced down at May, then back at Eliza. I need to tell you something, he said, and you're not going to like it. They went inside. May sat on the bed, picking at a loose thread on the quilt. Caleb paced the small room like a caged animal. I own land, he said finally. A lot of land. A ranch in the valley. Biggest one in the territory. Cattle, timber, water rights. My name carries weight. Eliza crossed her arms. So you're rich? Yes. And those men? They weren't sent to help me. They were sent by someone who wants May. Eliza's blood went cold. What? Caleb stopped pacing and looked at her, his face drawn. My wife had a sister, Victoria. After my wife died, Victoria tried to take May. Said I wasn't fit to raise her alone. She's got money, influence, a husband with political connections. She filed a petition with the county court. His voice shook. She wants custody. Eliza stared at him. And those men work for her or her husband? I don't know. But they're not here to bring me home. They're here to take May. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't think they'd find us. Caleb's voice cracked. I thought we'd get back on our own. I thought... He stopped, his hands clenching into fists. I didn't want to put you in the middle of this. Eliza looked at May, who was watching them both with wide, frightened eyes. Too late for that, Eliza said. Caleb ran a hand through his hair, his face twisted with guilt and fear. I'll leave, he said. Tonight. I'll take May and we'll go. You don't have to... Where? Eliza demanded. Where are you going to go? You got no horse, no supplies, no water? You'll be dead in 2 days. Then what do you suggest? Eliza was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. You said you own a ranch, she said slowly. Yes. And this woman, Victoria, she's trying to take May through the courts. Yes. Then you need to fight her, legally, properly. Eliza met his eyes. And you can't do that from a grave. Caleb stared at her. You're saying I should go back. I'm saying you should stop running, because running's just going to get that little girl taken from you. And if I go back, they'll come for her the second I walk through the door. Then don't make it easy for them. Caleb shook his head, his expression desperate. You don't understand. Victoria has everything, money, lawyers, connections. I'm just one man. You're her father, Eliza said sharply. That's not nothing. Caleb looked at May again, and something broke in his face. I can't lose her, he whispered. She's all I have left. Eliza's throat tightened. She thought of Thomas, of their son, of everything she'd lost and couldn't get back. Then fight, she said, and I'll help you. Caleb's head snapped up. What? You heard me? Eliza straightened, her voice steady now. You need to get back to your ranch. You need witnesses. You need people who will testify that you're a good father. And you need someone those bastards didn't expect. Why would you do that? Eliza looked at him for a long moment. She didn't have a good answer, didn't have a reason that made sense, but she thought of May's small hand in hers, of the way the girl had looked at her when she woke up, of the way Caleb had crawled through the dirt to save his daughter. Because it's the right thing to do, she said simply. Caleb's eyes shone. He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally nodded. All right, he said. All right. Eliza turned to the window, watching the dust settle where the riders had been. Then we leave at first light, she said, and we don't stop until we're safe. They left before dawn, when the air still held a whisper of coolness and the stars were fading into gray. Eliza had packed what little she could carry, A canteen, some dried meat, the rifle, and a change of clothes rolled tight in a flour sack. She locked the cabin door behind her, not knowing if she'd ever see it again. Caleb carried May on his back, the girl's thin arms wrapped around his neck, her cheek pressed against his shoulder. She hadn't spoken since they woke her, just nodded when her father explained they were leaving. Her eyes were dark and solemn in the pre-dawn light. They walked south, following the dry creek bed that would lead them toward Ridgewood and then beyond, into the valley where Caleb's ranch waited. The land stretched out before them in shades of dust and shadow, the mountains behind them turning purple as the sun began to rise. "How far?" Eliza asked, adjusting the rifle strap on her shoulder. 2 days on foot, maybe 3, Caleb said. His voice was hoarse from lack of water, but steady. "There's a way station about halfway. If it's still operating, we can get supplies. And if it's not, then we keep walking." Eliza nodded. She'd walked farther on less. She'd survived worse than heat and distance, but the weight of what they were walking toward sat heavy in her chest. A world of money and power and legal battles she didn't understand. A world where men like Wilder came looking for little girls and didn't take no for an answer. The sun climbed higher. The heat came with it, pressing down like a hand. May's head bobbed with each step Caleb took, but she didn't complain. Eliza watched the horizon, watched their back trail, watched for dust that would mean riders. They walked until the sun was directly overhead and the heat became unbearable. Caleb found a shallow overhang of rock that offered a slice of shade, and they stopped. May slid off his back and sat down heavily, her small chest heaving. Eliza passed the canteen. "Small sips." May drank carefully, then handed it back. Caleb drank next, then offered it to Eliza. She took just enough to wet her throat. "We'll rest an hour," Caleb said, lowering himself to the ground beside May. "Then push on before the worst heat." Eliza sat with her back against the rock, the rifle across her knees. She closed her eyes for just a moment, listening to the silence of the desert. No birds, no wind, just the sound of their breathing and the slow tick of the sun moving across the sky. "Miss Eliza?" May's voice was small and uncertain. Eliza opened her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart? Are those men going to take me away from Papa?" Caleb's face went pale. He started to speak, but Eliza held up a hand. "No," she said, looking directly at May. "They're not. Your Papa's not going to let that happen, and neither am I." "But Aunt Victoria says Papa can't take care of me by himself." "Your Aunt Victoria," Eliza said carefully, "doesn't know your Papa the way I do, and she doesn't get to decide what's best for you. That's between you and your father." May considered this, her small brow furrowed. "Do you promise?" Eliza met Caleb's eyes over the child's head. She saw the fear there, the desperate hope that someone else believed what he was trying so hard to believe himself. "I promise," Eliza said. May nodded slowly, then leaned against her father's side. Caleb wrapped an arm around her, his throat working. "Thank you," he mouthed to Eliza. She just nodded and turned her gaze back to the empty land. They walked through the afternoon, through the brutal heat that shimmered off the rocks and turned the air thick as water. Eliza's dress was soaked with sweat. Her boots rubbed blisters on her heels. But she kept walking, kept watching, kept the rifle ready. By evening, they'd covered maybe 10 miles. Not enough. Not nearly enough. They made camp in a dry wash where a few scraggly cottonwoods offered shelter. Caleb gathered what deadwood he could find while Eliza rationed out the last of the dried meat. May sat between them, quiet as always, her eyes following every movement. "Tell me about your ranch," Eliza said as they ate. "What's it like?" Caleb looked up, surprised by the question. "It's big. The house is 2 stories, built from timber we cut ourselves. There's a barn, a bunkhouse for the hands, cattle pens, a smithy. We run about 3,000 head of cattle across 20 sections." 20 sections, Eliza repeated. That was 12,000 acres, more land than she could picture. "My father started it," Caleb continued. "Built it from nothing. When he died, it came to me. I've been running it for 10 years now." "So you've got men working for you, hands, foremen, all that." "About 30, give or take. Good men, most of them. Been with the ranch for years." Eliza chewed slowly, thinking. "And Victoria, she's your wife's sister." "Yes, Younger by 3 years, she married a man named Raymond Ashford. He owns the bank in Ridgewood and half the businesses in town. They live in a big house with servants and carriages and all the trappings. Caleb's voice turned bitter. When my wife died, Victoria showed up at the funeral in black silk and told me she'd help with May. I thanked her and sent her home. 2 months later, I got papers saying she was petitioning for custody. On what grounds? That I'm an unfit father, that a ranch is no place for a young girl, that May needs a woman's influence and a proper education, and all the things Victoria thinks money can buy. He looked at his daughter, sleeping now with her head in his lap. She doesn't care about May. She cares about control, about winning. Eliza's jaw tightened. She'd known women like that, women who took and called it charity. What about the court? She asked. What did they say? They scheduled a hearing for next month. I have to prove I'm a suitable guardian, that May's being properly cared for, that I'm not neglecting her. The word came out like poison. But Victoria's got lawyers. She's got witnesses lined up to say I leave May alone while I work, that I drink, that I'm still grieving my wife and not thinking clearly. Are any of those things true? Caleb met her eyes. I work hard. The ranch requires it. But May's never alone. She's with the housekeeper, or the foreman's wife, or with me. I don't drink more than a whiskey at the end of a long day. And yes, I'm still grieving. I'll probably grieve for the rest of my life, but that doesn't mean I can't be a good father. Eliza believed him. She could hear the truth in his voice, see it in the way he held his daughter, even when she was asleep. Then we make sure the court sees that too, she said. How? I don't know yet, but we will. Caleb studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You could still walk away, go back to your cabin. This isn't your fight. I gave my word, Eliza said simply. That means something to me. Even for strangers? Especially for strangers. They're the ones who need it most. Caleb's throat worked. He looked down at May, smoothed her hair back from her forehead. I don't know how to repay you for this. Don't need repaying, just need you to fight. He nodded slowly. All right, I will. They took turns keeping watch that night. Eliza sat with the rifle across her knees, staring out at the dark shapes of the hills. She thought about Thomas, about the life they'd planned and the life she'd ended up with, about the cabin she'd left behind and the uncertain road ahead. She'd made a choice. She just hoped it was the right one. Morning came cold and clear. They ate the last of their food and drank the last of the water, then started walking again. The land began to change as they descended into the valley. More trees, greener grass, signs of water that hadn't completely dried up. By midday, they saw the way station. It was a low-slung building with a corral and a well, sitting at a crossroads where two wagon trails met. Smoke rose from the chimney. A horse stood tied at the rail. Wait here, Caleb said. Eliza caught his arm. We go together. He looked like he wanted to argue, then nodded. They approached slowly, Eliza's hand resting on the rifle. The door opened before they reached it, and a woman stepped out, older, gray-haired, wearing a stained apron and a suspicious expression. Help you? She asked. Need water and supplies if you've got them, Caleb said. We can pay. The woman's eyes flicked over them, dusty, exhausted, half-starved. Her expression softened slightly. Got water, got some beans and cornmeal, no meat. That'll do. She gestured them inside. The way station was dim and cool, smelling of wood smoke and coffee. A man sat at a corner table watching them with narrow eyes. Eliza recognized the type, a drifter, maybe a gambler, someone used to watching his back. The woman filled their canteens from a barrel and wrapped cornmeal and beans in brown paper. Caleb paid with coins from his pocket, and the woman's eyebrows rose. You're a ways from anywhere, she said. Where you headed? The Hart Ranch, Caleb said. The woman's hand stilled. She looked at him more carefully now, taking in his face, his bearing. You're Caleb Hart? I am. Heard you were lost. Dead, maybe. I'm not dead. The woman glanced at Eliza, at May. People been looking for you. I know. The man in the corner stood up, his chair scraping loud. He moved toward the door, his hand on his gun belt. Eliza shifted, putting herself between him and May. Just leaving, the man said, his eyes on Caleb. No trouble. He walked out. They heard hoofbeats a moment later, heading north at a gallop. The woman sighed. "He'll tell them you were here." "How long do we have?" Caleb asked. "Few hours, maybe. Depends how fast he rides and who he finds first." Caleb looked at Eliza. She saw the calculation in his eyes, how far they could get, whether they could make it to the ranch before the riders caught up. "We need horses," Eliza said. The woman shook her head. "Only got the one and she's old. Won't carry 3. "Then we need a wagon, a cart, anything." "Don't have that either." Eliza's mind raced. They were still 15 miles from the ranch. 3 hours walk at best, longer with May. If riders came from the north, they'd be caught in the open. "There's another way," the woman said slowly. "Old logging road runs east through the hills, comes out near the ranch from the backside. It's longer, but they won't expect it." "How much longer?" Caleb asked. 5 miles, maybe 6, but it's rough country. Not easy walking." Caleb looked at Eliza. She nodded. "We'll take it," he said. The woman gave them directions, her voice low and quick. "Follow the creek east till you hit the pine grove. There's a trail marker, old blaze on a dead tree. Trail starts there. Keep climbing till you hit the ridge, then follow it south. You'll see the ranch buildings in the valley below." "Why are you helping us?" Eliza asked. The woman's face hardened. "Because Victoria Ashford came through here last month, acting like she owned the place, treating me like dirt on her shoe. I don't care for people like that." She looked at May. "And I don't care for people who try to take children from their kin without good cause." Caleb's voice was rough. "Thank you." They left through the back door and headed east, moving as fast as May's short legs could manage. The land rose steadily, the grass giving way to scrub pine and then taller timber. They found the creek, followed it upstream, found the dead tree with the old blaze cut into its trunk. The trail was barely visible, just a trace through the undergrowth where loggers had dragged timber years ago. It climbed steeply, switchbacking up the hillside. May struggled, her breathing coming hard. Caleb picked her up again, and they kept moving. Behind them, somewhere in the valley, Eliza heard hoofbeats. Distant, faint, but coming. "They're looking for us," she said. "I know." Caleb's voice was tight. "Keep moving." They climbed higher, the trees grew thicker, the air cooler. May's head drooped against Caleb's shoulder, but she didn't complain. Eliza's legs burned, her lungs ached, but she kept pushing, kept watching their back trail. The hoofbeats faded. Either the riders had gone another direction, or the trees were muffling the sound. They reached the ridge as the sun began to drop toward the horizon. Through the trees, Eliza could see the valley spread out below, green and wide, with a river cutting through it like a silver thread. And there, nestled against the base of the mountains, was the ranch. It was bigger than she'd imagined. The main house was exactly as Caleb had described, 2 stories of solid timber, with a wide porch and glass windows that caught the last light. The barn was enormous, the corrals sprawling. She could see tiny figures moving between the buildings, ranch hands finishing the day's work, cattle being driven to pasture. It looked like a kingdom. "That's home," Caleb said quietly. May lifted her head, her eyes widening. "Papa, we're almost there." "Almost, sweetheart. Just a little farther." They started down the far side of the ridge, following a game trail that wound between the trees. The descent was harder than the climb, steeper, rockier, the ground loose underfoot. Eliza's boot slipped twice, and she caught herself against a tree, her palms scraping bark. Darkness was falling by the time they reached the valley floor. Lights had come on in the ranch house, warm and yellow in the gathering dusk. Eliza could smell wood smoke, hear the low call of cattle, see the flicker of lanterns in the bunkhouse windows. They crossed the last stretch of open ground, and a dog started barking. A moment later, a man stepped out of the barn, a lantern in his hand. "Who's there?" he called, his voice sharp. "It's me, Dutch," Caleb said, moving into the light. "It's Caleb." The man froze. Then he dropped the lantern and ran forward. "Jesus Christ, boss, we thought you were dead." He was older, weathered, with a gray beard and eyes that went wide when he saw May. "Little miss, you're all right." May smiled tiredly. "Hi, Dutch. Get inside, get inside." Dutch turned and shouted toward the house. "Martha, Martha, get out here. The boss is home! The front door of the house flew open. A woman emerged, round-faced, aproned, her gray hair escaping a bun. She took one look at Caleb and May and burst into tears. "Lord above," she gasped, hurrying down the steps. "Lord above, you're alive." She swept May into her arms, holding the girl tight, while Caleb sagged with relief. Then Martha turned to him, her eyes fierce. "Don't you ever do that to us again, Caleb Hart. You hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." Martha's gaze shifted to Eliza, taking her in with one quick, assessing look. "And who's this?" "Eliza Crow," Caleb said. "She saved our lives. If it weren't for her, we wouldn't be standing here." Martha's expression softened. She reached out and took Eliza's hand, squeezing it hard. "Then you're welcome here as long as you need," she said. "Come on, all of you. Inside. Food, water, rest. Everything else can wait." Eliza let herself be pulled toward the house, her legs shaking now that the walking was done. She glanced back once and saw Dutch talking rapidly to Caleb, his hands gesturing toward the road. Caleb's face went grim. Then they were inside, and the warmth and light surrounded her like a blanket. The house was everything the cabin wasn't. Spacious, furnished, clean. There was a real kitchen with a cast-iron stove, a dining table that could seat a dozen, rugs on the wooden floors. Martha sat May down and brought water, bread, cold chicken. The girl ate slowly, mechanically, her eyes half closed. Eliza stood by the window, still holding the rifle, unable to relax. She saw men gathering outside, ranch hands, coming in from the fields, clustering around Dutch and Caleb. Voices rose, urgent and low. Martha appeared at her elbow with a plate. "Eat, dear. You look half-starved." "What's happening out there?" Eliza asked. Martha's mouth thinned. "Word travels fast. The hands are loyal, but there's been talk. People asking questions, looking for the boss. That woman, Victoria, she's been stirring up trouble, saying Caleb ran off with May, that he's not in his right mind." Her voice dropped. "She tried to get the sheriff to declare him unfit, tried to take control of the ranch. Can she do that? Not legally? Not yet. But she's got influence, and she's not above bending the law to suit her needs." Eliza's grip tightened on the rifle. "Then we need to be ready." Martha looked at her sharply. "You planning to stay?" "I gave my word." Something like approval crossed Martha's face. "Then you'll need a bath, clean clothes, and a decent night's sleep. Can't fight a war if you're falling over." Eliza wanted to argue, but her body betrayed her. Her knees buckled, and Martha caught her arm. "Come on," the older woman said gently. "May's already asleep. Caleb can handle things for one night. You've done enough." Eliza let herself be led upstairs to a small bedroom with a real bed, a washstand, a window that looked out over the valley. Martha brought hot water, soap, a clean nightgown that smelled of lavender. Eliza washed the dust and sweat from her skin, feeling layers of exhaustion peel away. When she finally lay down, the mattress felt impossibly soft. She closed her eyes, expecting to fall asleep instantly. Instead, she lay awake, listening to the sounds of the house settling around her. Voices downstairs, footsteps, the creak of floorboards. She heard Caleb's voice, low and steady, talking to someone. Heard Dutch's gruff reply. Heard the front door open and close. She got up and went to the window. In the yard below, men were moving with purpose, checking weapons, saddling horses, posting guards, preparing for something. Eliza's stomach tightened. She dressed quickly in the clothes Martha had left, simple but clean, a dress that actually fit, and went downstairs. Caleb was in the main room, standing by the fireplace with Dutch and two other men. They looked up when she entered. "You should be resting," Caleb said. "What's going on?" He hesitated, then gestured to one of the men. "This is Tom Brennan, my foreman, and that's John Kepler. He runs the North Pasture. They've been filling me in." Tom stepped forward, a lean man with sharp eyes. "Ma'am, glad the boss found his way home." "What's he not telling me?" Eliza asked, looking at Caleb. Tom glanced at his boss, got a nod, and turned back to Eliza. "Victoria Ashford's been here 3 times since the boss went missing, each time with more men. Last time she brought the sheriff and tried to search the house, claiming she had the right to check on May's welfare. Martha ran her off with a shotgun." Despite everything, Eliza almost smiled. Good for Martha. "Problem is," Tom continued, "she's filed an emergency petition with the court. Claiming Caleb abandoned May, put her in danger, proved he's unfit. She's asking for immediate custody transfer. That's insane, Eliza said. He didn't abandon her. There was an accident. We know that. But she's got a judge who listens to her husband's money, and with the boss missing for nearly a week, it looked bad. Caleb's face was gray. When's the hearing? Day after tomorrow. Judge Harmon, over in Ridgewood. 2 days, Eliza said. That's not enough time to prepare. It's what we've got. Caleb looked at her. I need to ride into town tomorrow, talk to a lawyer, start building a defense. But I can't take May. If Victoria finds out I'm back, she'll try to grab her before the hearing. So May stays here, Eliza said, with guards. Yes, and I need you to stay with her. Eliza blinked. Me? You're the only one she trusts outside of Martha and me. And if something goes wrong, if they somehow get past the men, I need someone who'll fight for her. Eliza looked at the rifle still in her hand, then back at Caleb. You're asking me to protect your daughter. I'm asking you to be what I can't be right now, here, with her, keeping her safe. It was a huge ask, a responsibility Eliza hadn't signed up for. But when she thought about May, small and quiet and trusting, there was only one answer she could give. All right, she said. I'll stay. Relief flooded Caleb's face. Thank you. They talked strategy for another hour. Tom would ride with Caleb to town, along with 2 trusted hands. Dutch would command the ranch defenses, guards on rotation, weapons ready, no one in or out without authorization. Martha would keep the house locked down, May never out of sight, and Eliza would be the last line. When the meeting finally broke up, it was past midnight. The men dispersed to their posts. Caleb lingered, his hand on the doorframe, looking exhausted. You should sleep, Eliza said. So should you. I will. After I check on May. She climbed the stairs to the small room where the girl slept. May was curled on her side, her breathing deep and even, her small face peaceful in the lamplight. Eliza stood in the doorway, watching her. She'd lost her own child to fever, watched him slip away despite everything she'd tried, every prayer she'd whispered. She'd sworn she'd never let herself care that deeply again, never open herself to that kind of pain. But standing here, looking at this little girl who'd survived heat and fear and loss, Eliza felt something crack open inside her chest. I won't let them take you, she whispered. I promise. May stirred but didn't wake. Eliza pulled the blanket higher, smoothed the girl's hair, then stepped back into the hall. Caleb was there, leaning against the wall. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face drawn. You heard that? Eliza said. It wasn't a question. Yes. I meant it. I know you did. He pushed off the wall, standing straighter. Eliza, I know this is asking too much. I know you've already given more than anyone could expect. But I need to know, if it comes down to it, if they try to take her by force, I'll stop them, Eliza said flatly. However I have to. Caleb's throat worked. You do that? For a child you barely know? I'd do that for any child who deserved protecting, and May deserves it more than most. For a moment they just stood there in the dim hallway, the weight of what they were facing settling between them. Then Caleb nodded slowly. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow's going to be hard. He was right. But as Eliza lay down in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, she felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Purpose. She'd spent so long just surviving, just enduring, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to fight for something beyond her own next breath. Now she had a reason. Now she had someone who needed her to be strong. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her, the rifle within arm's reach, her promise echoing in the darkness. Eliza woke to the sound of horses and men's voices in the yard below. Dawn light filtered through the curtains, pale and cool. She dressed quickly, braided her hair, and checked the rifle before heading downstairs. The kitchen smelled of coffee and frying bacon. Martha stood at the stove, her movements brisk and efficient, while May sat at the table with a cup of milk and a piece of toast. The girl looked up when Eliza entered, and something like relief crossed her small face. Morning, Eliza said. Morning, dear, Martha replied without turning. Coffee's hot. Help yourself. Eliza poured a cup and sat down across from May. Through the window, she could see Caleb in the yard, talking with Tom and the other men. He was dressed for town, clean shirt, vest, his hat pulled low. He looked like a different man from the one she'd found crawling through the desert, but the tension in his shoulders was the same. "Is Papa leaving?" May asked quietly. "Just for the day," Eliza said. "He'll be back tonight. He's going to talk to the judge, isn't he, about Aunt Victoria?" Eliza set down her cup. The girl was too smart, too aware. "Yes." May's small hands tightened around her milk cup. "I don't want to live with Aunt Victoria. She doesn't like me. She just wants to win." "Your papa knows that. That's why he's fighting." "But what if the judge doesn't listen? What if they make me go anyway?" Eliza reached across the table and covered May's hand with her own. "Then your papa will keep fighting, and so will I. You're not going anywhere you don't want to go." May's eyes searched hers, looking for the truth beneath the promise. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she nodded and took a small bite of toast. The back door opened and Caleb came in, bringing the smell of horses and morning air. He kissed May's head, squeezed Martha's shoulder, then looked at Eliza. "Can I talk to you outside?" Eliza followed him onto the porch. The sun was just clearing the mountains, painting the valley in shades of gold and green. It was beautiful. She'd almost forgotten what beautiful looked like. "Dutch has men posted at every approach," Caleb said, keeping his voice low. "No one gets near the house without being seen. Martha knows to keep the doors locked and the shotgun loaded. But if something happens—" "Nothing's going to happen," Eliza interrupted. "You go do what you need to do. We'll be fine." Caleb looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes full of things he didn't say. "I trust you with my daughter's life. I hope you know what that means." "I do." He nodded once, then turned and walked toward the waiting horses. Tom was already mounted, along with two ranch hands Eliza didn't know. They rode out at a steady pace, heading south toward Ridgewood. Eliza watched until they disappeared beyond the tree line, then went back inside. The morning passed slowly. Martha worked in the kitchen, preparing bread dough and sorting vegetables from the root cellar. May sat by the window with a book, but Eliza noticed she wasn't turning the pages. The girl was watching the yard, watching the road, waiting for something to happen. Eliza understood that feeling. She checked the rifle 3 times, counted the ammunition, positioned herself where she could see both the front door and the approach from the road. Dutch came by once to report that everything was quiet, then returned to his patrol. By midday, the heat had settled over the ranch like a blanket. Eliza stood on the porch, squinting at the horizon. Nothing moved except the cattle in the distant pastures and the occasional hawk circling overhead. Too quiet. Martha called her in for lunch: cold chicken, fresh bread, water from the well. They ate in the kitchen, the 3 of them, and for a moment it almost felt normal, almost felt like family. Then the dog started barking. Eliza was on her feet instantly, rifle in hand. Through the window, she saw Dutch running toward the house, waving his arm. Behind him, rising dust-marked riders coming in fast from the east. "Martha, take May upstairs," Eliza said, her voice sharp. "Lock the door. Don't come out unless I call for you." Martha didn't argue. She grabbed May's hand and hurried toward the stairs. Eliza heard their footsteps overhead, heard the click of a lock. She stepped onto the porch as the riders came into view. There were 6 of them, led by a woman on a tall gray horse. Even from a distance, Eliza could see the expensive cut of her riding habit, the way she sat her saddle like she owned the world. Victoria Ashford. The riders stopped 20 yards from the house. Victoria dismounted with practiced grace and walked forward, her eyes taking in the ranch hands positioned around the yard, the rifle in Eliza's hands, the locked door behind her. "You must be the woman who brought my brother-in-law home," Victoria said. Her voice was cultured, cold. "How convenient." "This is private property," Eliza replied. "State your business or leave." Victoria's smile was thin and sharp. "My business is with my niece. I'm here to ensure her welfare." "May's welfare is just fine." "I'll be the judge of that. Step aside." "No." Victoria's expression hardened. She gestured, and 2 of her men dismoved. One of them was Wilder, the man with the marshal's badge. He walked forward, his hand resting on his gun. "Mrs. Ashford has a court order authorizing welfare checks," Wilder said. "You're interfering with legal proceedings." "Let me see it," Eliza said. Wilder pulled a folded paper from his vest and held it up. Eliza couldn't read it from this distance, didn't know if it was real or not. But she knew one thing for certain. These people weren't here to check on May's welfare. The child stays inside, Eliza said. That's not your decision to make, Victoria snapped. Caleb's not here. He's run off again, hasn't he? Abandoned his responsibilities like always. He's in Ridgewood, meeting with his lawyer. He'll be back tonight. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Then there's no one here with legal authority over the child, which means my petition for emergency custody has grounds. Eliza's blood went cold. That's not how this works. Isn't it? Victoria took another step forward. A man disappears with his daughter, nearly gets her killed in the desert, then leaves her in the care of a stranger while he runs off to town. That sounds like neglect to me. That sounds like a man who can't be trusted. He was visiting his wife's grave when there was an accident. He didn't abandon anyone. So you say, but where's the proof? Where's the evidence? Victoria's voice turned sharp as glass. All I see is a traumatized child being held in a locked house by an armed woman I've never met. That's grounds for immediate intervention. Dutch appeared from the barn, his shotgun visible. 3 other ranch hands emerged from various positions, all armed, all watching. You need to leave, Mrs. Ashford, Dutch said, before this gets ugly. Wilder's hand moved closer to his gun. You threatening an officer of the law? I'm protecting my employer's property and family. There's a difference. The tension stretched tight as wire. Eliza's finger rested near the rifle's trigger, her heart pounding. 6 armed men against 4. Not good odds. But she'd fought worse. Then Victoria laughed. It was a cold, calculated sound. This is exactly what I needed, she said. Witnesses to see the kind of environment that child is living in. Armed guards, locked doors, violence waiting to happen. She looked directly at Eliza. When the judge hears about this, Caleb won't have a leg to stand on. She turned and walked back to her horse, her men following. But before she mounted, she called out, Tell my brother-in-law I'll see him in court tomorrow. And tell him to say goodbye to May tonight. It'll be his last chance. They rode off, dust rising in their wake. Eliza's hands were shaking. She lowered the rifle and looked at Dutch, who was cursing under his breath. She wanted this, Eliza said. She wanted us to threaten her. Yeah, Dutch said grimly, and we gave it to her. Eliza went back inside and called up the stairs. Martha, it's safe. The lock clicked. Martha came down first, her face pale, then May appeared behind her. The girl's eyes were red from crying. Was that Aunt Victoria? May asked, her voice small. Yes. Is she going to take me? Eliza knelt down so she was eye level with the child. Not if we can help it, but May, I need you to be very brave tomorrow. Can you do that? May nodded, her small chin trembling. I'll try. That's all anyone can ask. The rest of the day crawled by. Eliza paced the house, checking windows, watching the road. Martha tried to keep May distracted with chores and games, but the girl's attention kept drifting to the window, to the road where her father would return. Sunset came and went. Darkness fell. Still no sign of Caleb. Eliza stood on the porch, the rifle across her knees, watching the road. Beside her, Dutch leaned against the rail. He'll be here, the older man said. Boss wouldn't miss this. Unless something happened. Tom's with him. Tom knows how to handle trouble. Eliza wanted to believe that, but doubt gnawed at her. What if Victoria had sent men to intercept them? What if something had gone wrong in town? Then she saw lights in the distance. Lanterns moving toward the ranch. That's them, Dutch said, relief clear in his voice. 3 riders came into the yard, Caleb, Tom, and one of the hands. They looked exhausted, covered in dust, but alive. Caleb dismounted and strode toward the porch, his face grim. What happened? Eliza asked. Victoria showed up at the lawyer's office, caused a scene, made accusations, tried to get me arrested for kidnapping. He pulled off his hat and ran a hand through his hair. The lawyer, man named Carson, he's good. He shut her down. But she's got the judge in her pocket, Eliza. Carson admitted it. He said we're fighting uphill. Then we fight harder. Caleb looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. Victoria came here, didn't she? This afternoon, with 6 men and a fake court order. What happened? We didn't let her in. She made threats, got what she wanted, evidence that we're violent and dangerous. Eliza's voice was flat. She's going to use it against you in court. Caleb's jaw tightened. Did May see her? No, Martha kept her upstairs. Good. He looked toward the house, toward the lit windows where his daughter waited. I need to see her. Eliza watched him go inside, heard May's cry of relief, heard Caleb's low, soothing voice. She stayed on the porch with Dutch, the night air cool against her skin. You think we can win this? She asked quietly. Dutch was silent for a moment. I think Caleb's got more fight in him than Victoria expects, and I think having you here changes things. How? You're proof he's not alone. Proof he's thinking about what May needs. Dutch looked at her. Judge might not care, but it's something. It didn't feel like enough. Later, after May had gone to bed and the house had quieted, Caleb and Eliza sat in the main room. A fire burned low in the hearth, more for comfort than warmth. Carson, the lawyer, had come back with them and now sat in a leather chair reviewing papers. He was a thin man with gray hair and sharp eyes, dressed in a suit that had seen better days. He looked tired, but determined. The hearing's set for 10 o'clock, Carson said. Judge Harmon presiding. Victoria's lawyer is Marcus Penfield, slick, expensive, connected. He'll argue that Caleb's recent actions prove unfitness. The disappearance, the danger to May, the current living situation with armed guards. All of which has context, Caleb said. Context doesn't always matter in custody cases. What matters is perception. Carson looked at Eliza. Mrs. Crow, you're going to be a key witness. Victoria doesn't know about you yet, doesn't know your role in all this. That gives us an advantage. What do you need me to say? The truth, that Caleb and May were dying when you found them, that Caleb's first priority was his daughter's safety, that you've observed him as a father and found him devoted, responsible, capable. Carson paused. And that the current security measures are a direct response to Victoria's harassment. Will the judge listen? Judge Harmon's a hard man to read. He follows the letter of the law, but he's not immune to influence. Victoria's husband has donated heavily to his campaigns. Carson's expression was bleak. I won't lie to you. This is going to be difficult. Caleb stood and walked to the window, staring out at the dark yard. If we lose, what happens? Temporary custody goes to Victoria pending a full hearing. She'd have the right to take May immediately. Over my dead body, Caleb said, his voice low and dangerous. That kind of talk is exactly what loses custody cases, Carson said sharply. You need to be calm, respectful, reasonable. Let me handle the legal arguments. You just need to be the man who loves his daughter and wants what's best for her. Caleb's hands clenched into fists. And if being that man isn't enough, then we appeal. We keep fighting, but right now, we focus on tomorrow. Carson left an hour later. Eliza helped Martha bank the fire and check the locks. When she came back downstairs, Caleb was still standing by the window, his silhouette dark against the glass. You should sleep, she said. Can't. Eliza understood. She crossed the room and stood beside him, looking out at the same darkness. Tell me about your wife, she said quietly. Caleb was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice rough with old grief. Her name was Sarah. She was gentle, kind, always saw the best in people, including Victoria. He laughed bitterly. Sarah thought her sister just needed love and patience, thought eventually Victoria would soften. She was wrong. How did they get along? They didn't. Victoria was always jealous of Sarah's marriage, of this ranch, of the life we built. When Sarah got pregnant with May, Victoria was furious, said Sarah was throwing her life away on frontier nonsense. Caleb's voice cracked. 2 years later, Sarah got pregnant again. The birth went wrong. The baby was breech, and the midwife couldn't turn him. Sarah bled for hours. The baby died first, then Sarah followed. Eliza's throat tightened. I'm sorry. Victoria showed up at the funeral and told me it was my fault. Said if Sarah had stayed in the city, had access to real doctors, she'd still be alive. Said I'd killed her sister with my stubborn pride. That's not fair. Maybe not. But sometimes I wonder if she's right. Caleb turned to look at her, his eyes haunted. I brought Sarah out here. I built this life and asked her to share it, and it killed her. You didn't kill her. Childbirth is dangerous anywhere, city or frontier. You know that. Knowing and believing are different things. Eliza understood that too. She'd spent 3 years knowing that her son's fever wasn't her fault, that she'd done everything she could, but believing it was another matter entirely. Victoria doesn't want May out of love, Eliza said. She wants her out of spite, to punish you, to win. I know, but that doesn't change the fact that she has power, and I'm just one man trying to hold on to what's left of my family. You're not just one man. You've got Martha, Dutch, Tom, all the hands who've stood by you. You've got Carson fighting in court. Eliza paused. And you've got me. Caleb looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Why are you doing this? Really? I told you, I gave my word. There's more to it than that. Eliza turned away, her arms crossed. I lost my son to fever, watched him die and couldn't do anything to stop it, couldn't save him no matter how hard I tried. Her voice was steady but hollow. I can't save him, but maybe I can save May. Eliza? Don't. She held up a hand. Don't tell me it's not my responsibility or that I'm doing enough. I know what I'm doing and why. Just let me do it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Caleb nodded slowly. All right, he said. Thank you. Eliza went upstairs to check on May one more time. The girl was asleep, her small body curled under the quilts, her breathing soft and even. Eliza stood in the doorway, watching her. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, a judge would decide this child's future. And all Eliza could do was tell the truth and hope it was enough. She went to her own room but didn't sleep. She sat by the window, the rifle across her lap, watching the night, watching for riders who might come early, watching for anything that might threaten the fragile peace they'd built. Dawn came cold and gray. Eliza dressed in the best clothes she had, the clean dress Martha had given her, her hair braided and pinned. She looked at herself in the small mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. When had she last cared what she looked like? When had she last had a reason to? Downstairs, May sat at the table in a blue dress with white lace, her hair brushed until it shone. She looked like a doll, perfect and fragile. Martha hovered nearby, straightening the girl's collar, smoothing invisible wrinkles. Caleb appeared in a dark suit, clean-shaven, his hair combed back. He looked every inch the successful rancher, the responsible father, but Eliza could see the tension in his shoulders, the fear in his eyes. "Ready?" he asked. "As we'll ever be," Eliza replied. They took the carriage, Caleb driving, with Eliza and May inside, and Tom riding alongside as escort. The road to Ridgewood was quiet, the morning air sharp with the promise of autumn. May sat pressed against Eliza's side, her small hand clutching Eliza's fingers. "It's going to be all right," Eliza murmured. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." May nodded but didn't speak. The town appeared on the horizon, a cluster of buildings along a wide main street, church steeple rising above the rest. The courthouse was a 2-story brick building at the far end, imposing and official. A crowd had already gathered on the steps, townspeople drawn by gossip, lawyers with their briefcases, and Victoria Ashford surrounded by well-dressed supporters. She saw them arrive. Her eyes locked on May, and something cold and triumphant crossed her face. Caleb helped them down from the carriage. Carson appeared at his elbow, looking grim but ready. "Remember," the lawyer said quietly. "Calm, respectful, honest. Let me do the talking unless you're directly questioned." They climbed the courthouse steps. Victoria moved to intercept them, her smile sharp. "Caleb, how good of you to bring May. It'll make the transition so much easier." "There's not going to be a transition," Caleb said evenly. "We'll see what Judge Harmon has to say about that." She swept past them into the courthouse, her entourage following. Eliza felt May's hand tighten in hers. "I'm scared," the girl whispered. "I know, sweetheart, but you're going to be brave, just like we talked about." They entered the courtroom, a wood-paneled room with high windows and rows of benches. The judge's bench loomed at the front, empty for now. Victoria sat on the left side with her lawyer, a sleek man in an expensive suit. Caleb, Eliza, and Carson took the right. People filed in, filling the benches. Eliza recognized some of the ranch hands, Martha in the back row, townspeople whose faces held curiosity and judgment in equal measure. Then a door opened and Judge Harmon entered. He was an older man, gray-haired and stern, wearing black robes that made him look like a crow. Everyone stood. "Court is in session," the bailiff announced. "The matter of Victoria Ashford versus Caleb Hart. Petition for custody of minor child, May Elizabeth Hart." The judge sat. Everyone else followed. "Mr. Penfield," Judge Harmon said, "you may present your case." Victoria's lawyer stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. "Thank you, Your Honor. This case is tragically simple. A father, still grieving his wife's death, has proven himself unable to properly care for his young daughter. 3 weeks ago, he took the child into dangerous territory without adequate supplies or protection. When a heat storm struck, he lost their horses and nearly got the child killed through sheer negligence. They wandered the desert for 2 days before being found by a stranger. The child suffered severe heat stroke and dehydration. She could have died." Murmurs ran through the courtroom. May pressed closer to Eliza. "Furthermore," Penfield continued, "upon returning to his ranch, Mr. Hart immediately left the child in the care of said stranger, a woman with no credentials, no references, no legal standing, while he attended to business matters. The ranch has become an armed camp with guards posted and weapons visible. This is no environment for a young girl. My client, Mrs. Ashford, offers a stable home, proper education, female guidance, and the resources to ensure May's welfare and future." He sat down, looking satisfied. Judge Harmon turned to Carson. "Mr. Carson?" Carson stood, his voice steady and clear. "Your Honor, Mr. Penfield's version of events is incomplete and misleading. Mr. Hart did not take his daughter into dangerous territory carelessly. He took her to visit her mother's grave, a trip they'd made safely many times before. An unexpected weather event, rare and unpredictable, caused their horses to bolt. This was an accident, not negligence." "An accident that nearly killed the child," Penfield interjected. "An accident that Mr. Hart survived through courage and dedication to his daughter," Carson shot back. "He carried her for 2 days in brutal heat, giving her his water, his food, his strength. When he collapsed, it was from exhaustion earned protecting her. That's not negligence, Your Honor. That's love." Judge Harmon held up a hand. "Continue, Mr. Carson." "As for the woman caring for May, Mrs. Eliza Crow is not a stranger. She is the person who saved both their lives. She is a witness to Mr. Hart's devotion as a father, and she is here today to testify to that fact. The security measures at the ranch are not evidence of instability. They are a necessary response to Mrs. Ashford's repeated harassment and threats. She has come to the property multiple times with armed men, attempting to forcibly remove the child without legal authority." "That's a lie!" Victoria stood, her face flushed. "Mrs. Ashford, sit down," Judge Harmon said sharply. Carson pressed on. "Mr. Hart is a successful rancher, a respected member of this community, and a loving father. His only crime is being a widower trying to raise his daughter in the home they built together. That should not be grounds for tearing a family apart." He sat down. The courtroom was silent. Judge Harmon looked over his glasses at both sides. "I'll hear from the witnesses. Mr. Penfield, call your first." What followed was a parade of Victoria's supporters, society women who testified that a ranch was no place for a child, that May needed refinement and culture, that Caleb was too rough and his grief had made him unstable, a doctor who said heat stroke could have caused permanent damage, a banker who suggested Caleb's finances were questionable. Carson cross-examined each one, poking holes in their testimony, revealing their connections to Victoria, their lack of direct knowledge about May's actual welfare. Then it was Carson's turn. "I call Mrs. Eliza Crow to the stand." Eliza stood, her heart pounding. She walked to the witness box and placed her hand on the Bible, swearing to tell the truth. She sat down, facing the courtroom, facing Victoria's cold stare and Caleb's desperate hope. Carson approached gently. "Mrs. Crow, please tell the court how you met Mr. Hart and his daughter." Eliza took a breath and began. She told them about the heat, the cabin, the sound of a child crying, about finding May collapsed and dying, about Caleb crawling toward his daughter with the last of his strength. She described those days in her cabin, how Caleb never left May's side, how he gave up food and water for her, how his every thought was for her welfare. In your observation, Mrs. Crow, is Mr. Hart a fit father? Yes, Eliza said without hesitation. He would die for that little girl. In fact, he nearly did. Penfield stood for cross-examination, his smile sharp. Mrs. Crow, you live alone in an isolated cabin, is that correct? Yes. No husband, no family, no children of your own? My husband and son are dead. I see. And you make your living how? I manage. So you're a poor widow living hand-to-mouth in the wilderness, and now you're living at Mr. Hart's ranch, wearing clothes he provided, eating food from his table. Seems convenient. Objection, Carson said. Relevance? I'm establishing witness credibility, Your Honor. Mrs. Crow has a financial interest in supporting Mr. Hart. I don't want his money, Eliza said, her voice sharp. I want that little girl to stay with her father because that's where she belongs. How noble. Tell me, Mrs. Crow, are you and Mr. Hart romantically involved? The courtroom erupted in whispers. Caleb half rose from his seat. Carson shouted an objection. Answer the question, Judge Harmon said. No, Eliza said clearly. We are not. But you're living in his house, sleeping under his roof, caring for his child. That seems rather intimate for people who are not involved. I'm helping a man protect his daughter from someone who wants to take her out of spite, Eliza said, her voice steady despite the fury building in her chest. There's nothing improper about that. Penfield smiled. Nothing improper about a single woman living with a single man? I think many in this town would disagree. Then they can mind their own business, Eliza snapped. Judge Harmon banged his gavel. That's enough. Mrs. Crow, you're excused. Eliza returned to her seat, shaking with anger. Caleb reached over and briefly squeezed her hand, his face pale. The final witness was May herself. Carson had warned them this might happen, that judges sometimes spoke directly to children in custody cases. But nothing prepared Eliza for watching May walk to the stand, so small she could barely see over the edge, her blue dress making her look even younger than her 6 years. Judge Harmon's voice gentled. Hello, May. Do you know why you're here? Yes, sir, because Aunt Victoria wants me to live with her. And how do you feel about that? May's small voice was clear. I don't want to. I want to stay with Papa. Why is that? Because he's my Papa. He takes care of me. He loves me. Does your aunt not love you? May was quiet for a moment. She says she does, but she doesn't look at me the way Papa does. She looks at me like I'm something she won. The courtroom was utterly silent. May, your Papa took you into the desert and you got very sick. Were you scared? Yes, but Papa was there. He carried me even when he was tired. He gave me water even when he was thirsty. May's eyes filled with tears. He wouldn't let me die, and Miss Eliza wouldn't either. They both saved me. If I said you had to go live with your aunt, what would you do? May's tears spilled over. I'd run away. I'd find Papa and Miss Eliza, and I'd stay with them because they're my family now. Judge Harmon sat back, his expression unreadable. Thank you, May. You can go back to your seat. May climbed down and ran to Caleb, who wrapped his arms around her. Eliza felt her own eyes burning. I'll take a brief recess to consider my ruling, the judge said. He stood and left through the side door. The courtroom erupted in conversation. Victoria was talking urgently to her lawyer. Caleb held May, whispering to her. Carson leaned over to Eliza. That was either the best thing that could have happened or the worst, he said quietly. Judges don't like being told they're wrong by 6-year-olds. 20 minutes passed like 20 hours. Then the bailiff called them back to order. Judge Harmon returned, his face stern. I've heard testimony from both sides, he began. This is a difficult case. A child's welfare must be paramount, but so must parental rights. Mr. Hart made a serious error in judgment taking his daughter into dangerous territory. However, his actions during and after the incident demonstrate dedication and love. Mrs. Ashford offers stability and resources, but there is a question of motive. And most importantly, the child herself has expressed a clear preference. Victoria gripped her lawyer's arm. Therefore, Judge Harmon continued, I am denying Mrs. Ashford's petition for custody. May Hart will remain with her father." The courtroom exploded. Caleb sagged with relief. May burst into tears of joy, and Victoria shot to her feet, her face twisted with rage. "This is outrageous," she shouted. "That man is unfit. That woman is Mrs. Ashford, control yourself," the judge said coldly. "However, Mr. Hart, I am not finished." The room quieted. "I am ordering a follow-up evaluation in 3 months. A court-appointed official will visit your ranch to assess May's living conditions, education, and overall welfare. If I find any evidence of neglect, instability, or impropriety, this ruling will be reversed. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Caleb said hoarsely. "Court is adjourned." The gavel fell. People surged forward as soon as the judge left the courtroom. Ranch hands clapped Caleb on the back. Martha pushed through the crowd to gather May into her arms. Carson shook Caleb's hand, already talking about the 3-month evaluation and what it would require. But through it all, Eliza saw Victoria standing motionless in the center of the chaos, her face a mask of cold fury. Their eyes met across the room. Victoria's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "This isn't over," she mouthed. Then she turned and swept out, her lawyer and supporters trailing behind her like the train of a poisoned dress. Eliza's stomach tightened. They'd won the battle, but the war was far from finished. Outside, the autumn sun felt too bright after the dimness of the courtroom. Caleb lifted May onto his shoulders, and the girl laughed for the first time in days. Tom brought the carriage around, grinning wide. "Knew you'd pull through, boss," he said. But as they rode back toward the ranch, the celebration faded. Caleb's expression grew more troubled with each mile. Finally, he spoke. 3 months. That's all we have to prove this is working." "Then we make it work," Eliza said. "You heard what the judge said. A court official will come to inspect everything. May's education, her living conditions, the whole operation. And he mentioned impropriety." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Penfield planted that seed deliberately. Made it sound like there's something going on between us. There isn't. I know that. You know that. But perception matters. If the evaluator shows up and you're still living in the house, still caring for May, people will talk. The judge will hear it." He looked at her, his eyes troubled. "We need to make this look proper, legal, unquestionable." Eliza understood what he was saying before he said it. "You're talking about marriage." May's head came up from where she'd been dozing against Martha's shoulder. "Marriage?" Caleb glanced at his daughter, then back at Eliza. "A marriage of convenience, on paper only. It would give you legal standing to care for May. It would stop the gossip, and it would show the court that May has a stable home with 2 parents." "That's crazy," Eliza said. "Is it? You're already doing the work, already caring for her. This just makes it official. Marriage isn't something you do for convenience. People do it all the time, for land, for money, for alliances. Why not for a child's welfare?" Eliza looked out the window at the passing landscape. Her heart was racing. Marriage. She'd been married once to a man she loved, and that had ended in grief and ashes. The thought of doing it again, even in name only, felt like stepping into a river she couldn't see the bottom of. "I need to think about it," she said finally. Caleb nodded. "Fair enough." They rode the rest of the way in silence. Back at the ranch, Dutch and the other hands were waiting with questions. Caleb filled them in on the judge's ruling, the 3-month evaluation, the conditions they had to meet. Then he called a meeting in the main house, just him, Eliza, Martha, and Tom. "We need a plan," Caleb said, pacing the room. "The evaluator will check everything. May's education, her health, the household management, the ranch finances. We can't give them any reason to question my fitness as a father." "May's healthy," Martha said. "I've been teaching her reading and arithmetic. She's smart as a whip." "That's good, but she needs formal schooling, the kind Victoria would provide." Caleb ran a hand through his hair. "There's a school teacher in Ridgewood, Mrs. Patterson. She might be willing to come out a few times a week." "I'll talk to her," Tom offered. "What about the ranch?" Eliza asked. "Is it running well?" "Better than well," Tom said. "Cattle prices are up. We've got contracts for timber delivery. The books are clean." He hesitated. "But Victoria's husband owns the bank. If he decides to make trouble with our loans, then we pay them off," Caleb said flatly. "I've got savings." I'll clear every debt we owe to Ashford's bank by the end of the week. Martha cleared her throat. And what about the household? The evaluator's going to want to see a proper home. Clean, organized, respectable. You already run the tightest household in the territory, Caleb said. Maybe, but I'm just the housekeeper. What they'll want to see is a woman of the house, a mother figure. Martha's eyes slid to Eliza. Someone with legal standing. The room went quiet. Eliza felt everyone's attention settle on her. She looked at May, who was sitting quietly in the corner with a book, pretending not to listen, but clearly hanging on every word. I haven't agreed to anything, Eliza said. I know, Caleb replied, and I'm not going to pressure you, but Eliza, if you say no, I understand. You've already given more than anyone had a right to ask. What happens if I say no? Caleb's face was bleak. Then I hire a governess, someone proper and credentialed. I make sure everything looks perfect on paper, and I hope it's enough. You don't sound convinced. Because I'm not. Victoria's going to fight this with everything she has. She'll find a way to twist whatever we do. But if you're here, if you're legally part of this family, it's harder for her to claim May's being neglected or improperly supervised. Eliza stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The ranch spread out below, peaceful and productive. This could be her home. This could be her family. Or it could be another trap, another way to lose everything she cared about. I need time, she said. Take all the time you need, Caleb said gently. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She lay in the comfortable bed in the comfortable room and stared at the ceiling, her mind churning. Marriage, family, responsibility, risk. She thought about Thomas, about the vows they'd made and the life they'd planned. She thought about their son, about the weight of him in her arms and the emptiness when he was gone. She thought about the years she'd spent alone in that cabin, surviving but not living, existing but not hoping. And she thought about May, about the girl's small hand in hers, about the promise she'd made, about the look on May's face when the judge said she could stay with her father. There was a soft knock on her door. Come in, Eliza said. The door opened and May slipped inside, barefoot and wearing a white nightgown. She closed the door quietly behind her and padded across the room. Can't sleep? Eliza asked. May shook her head. Can I sit with you? Eliza pulled back the covers and May climbed in, curling up against her side. They sat in silence for a moment, the lamplight throwing soft shadows on the walls. Are you going to marry Papa? May asked finally. Eliza's breath caught. I don't know, sweetheart. Aunt Victoria said you were just a poor woman who wanted Papa's money, that you were trying to trick him. Anger flared hot in Eliza's chest. When did she say that? Before the hearing. She came to talk to me. She said you weren't really my friend, that you'd leave as soon as you got what you wanted. May looked up at her, eyes huge in the dim light. Is that true? No, Eliza said firmly. That is absolutely not true. I don't want your father's money. I never have. Then why are you still here? It was a fair question. Eliza had asked herself the same thing a dozen times. Because I made you a promise, she said slowly. And because when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for, someone worth protecting. Like how Papa fought for me? Yes, like that. May was quiet for a moment. Then, in a small voice, she said, I wish you were my mama. Eliza's throat tightened. Oh, sweetheart, I know you're not. I know my real mama is dead and she's never coming back. But when you take care of me, it feels like having a mama again. And I don't want that to stop. Eliza pulled the girl closer, blinking back tears. It won't stop. No matter what happens, I'm not going to abandon you. Promise? I promise. May relaxed against her, her breathing evening out. Within minutes, she was asleep. Eliza sat there holding her, feeling the weight of this child's trust, this child's need, and she knew then what her answer would be. She waited until morning to tell Caleb. She found him in the barn, checking on a mare that was due to foal. He looked up when she entered, his expression wary and hopeful at the same time. I'll do it, Eliza said without preamble. I'll marry you. Caleb straightened slowly. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. She met his eyes. This is for May. We're clear on that. Completely clear. And when the 3 months are up, when the evaluation is done and May is safe, we figure out what comes next. Maybe we stay married on paper. Maybe we don't. But we make those decisions together. Agreed. And you don't owe me anything. I'm not doing this for the ranch or the money or any kind of security. I'm doing it because that little girl deserves a fighting chance. Caleb crossed the distance between them and held out his hand. Thank you, Eliza. I know what this costs you. She shook his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. Let's just make sure it's worth it. They were married 3 days later in a quiet ceremony in the ranch house. The circuit preacher came out from Ridgewood, a kind old man who didn't ask too many questions. Martha and Dutch stood as witnesses. May wore her blue dress and held a handful of wildflowers. The ceremony was brief. Caleb spoke his vows in a steady voice. Eliza repeated hers, meaning every word, even though the circumstances were nothing like she'd imagined. When the preacher said they could kiss, Caleb hesitated, then leaned in and pressed a chaste kiss to her cheek. Thank you, he whispered again. They signed the papers. It was done. That night there was a small celebration. Martha made a cake. The ranch hands raised glasses of whiskey. May danced around the room, delighted that Miss Eliza was now officially part of the family. But when everyone had gone to bed, Eliza stood alone in her room, not theirs, that had been made clear, and looked at the simple gold band on her finger. She was married, again, to a man she barely knew, for a child who wasn't hers. She should have felt trapped. Instead, she felt something else, something like purpose. The next morning, word reached the ranch that Victoria had heard about the marriage. She'd apparently flown into a rage, smashing china in her parlor and screaming that Caleb had made a mockery of her sister's memory. Her lawyer sent a letter claiming the marriage was fraudulent, a transparent attempt to circumvent the court's oversight. Carson's response was swift. The marriage was legal, documented, and none of Victoria's business. The court had ordered an evaluation in 3 months. Until then, she had no standing to interfere. But Eliza knew Victoria wouldn't let it rest. A woman like that never did. She was proven right a week later when Caleb came in from the south pasture, his face grim. Someone cut the fence line, let about 50 head of cattle wander off. Could it have been an accident? Eliza asked. The cuts were clean, deliberate, and there were boot prints leading back toward the road. Tom came in behind him. Found this nailed to the fence post. He held up a piece of paper with a single word scrawled in black ink. Thief. She's trying to make it look like I'm mismanaging the ranch, Caleb said. Trying to build a case that everything's falling apart. What are you going to do? Round up the cattle, post more guards, document everything so when the evaluator comes, I can show this is sabotage, not negligence. He looked tired. And hope she doesn't escalate. But Victoria did escalate. Over the next 6 weeks, the incidents continued. Supplies went missing. A barn door was left open, spooking the horses. Someone spread rumors in town that Caleb was drinking heavily, that his new wife was just a gold digger, that May was being neglected. Each time they countered, each time they documented, each time they held on. Eliza threw herself into making the household run perfectly. She worked alongside Martha, learning to manage the complex operation of feeding ranch hands, organizing supplies, maintaining the house to exacting standards. She spent time with May every day, teaching her alongside the reading and arithmetic Martha had started. Mrs. Patterson, the school teacher, came twice a week and reported that May was advanced for her age, bright and curious. And slowly, despite the circumstances, Eliza found herself settling into this life. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, learned which hands were reliable and which needed supervision, learned how to read the weather, how to plan meals for 30 hungry men, how to balance books and manage household accounts. She also learned Caleb, learned that he rose before dawn every day and checked on May before heading out to work, learned that he was fair with his men but firm, respected but not feared, learned that he carried his grief quietly, a weight he bore alone even when he was surrounded by people. They were polite to each other, respectful. They discussed May's education, the ranch's finances, the upcoming evaluation. But there was a distance between them, a careful neutrality that both of them maintained, until the night of the accident. Caleb had been working with a young stallion, trying to break him to saddle. The horse was spirited, half wild, and Caleb had insisted on handling it himself despite Tom's offers to help. Eliza had watched from the porch, her heart in her throat as the stallion bucked and reared. Then it happened. The horse threw Caleb hard. He hit the ground with a sickening thud and didn't get up. Eliza was running before she realized she'd moved. She vaulted the fence and reached him just as Tom and Dutch arrived. Caleb was conscious, but his face was white with pain. His left arm hung at an odd angle. "Don't move him," Eliza said sharply. "Tom, get the wagon. Dutch, find something to splint his arm." They worked quickly, efficiently. They got Caleb into the wagon, got him to the house, sent for the doctor in town. By the time the doctor arrived 2 hours later, Caleb was sweating with pain, and Eliza had dosed him with whiskey to take the edge off. The doctor examined him carefully. Broken arm, 3 ribs cracked, possible concussion. He's lucky it wasn't worse. "How long before he can work again?" Tom asked. 6 weeks for the ribs to heal, 8 to 10 for the arm. And that's if he rests, which knowing Caleb Hart, he won't. The doctor was right. Caleb tried to get up the next morning and nearly passed out from pain. Eliza forced him back to bed. "You heard the doctor. 6 weeks. The ranch doesn't run itself. Tom can handle it. He's been your foreman for how long? 10 years? He knows what to do. There are decisions that need to be made, contracts to negotiate, supplies to order. Then you make those decisions from bed, but you're not getting on a horse or lifting anything heavier than a fork until you're healed." Caleb glared at her. "You're not my nursemaid. No, I'm your wife, and I'm not letting you kill yourself out of stubborn pride." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Something shifted in his expression. "You're right," he said finally. "I'm sorry." Eliza blinked, surprised. She'd expected more fight. "Tom can handle the day-to-day," Caleb continued, "but there are things he can't do. Banking, contracts, legal matters. I usually handle those myself." "Then teach me." "What?" "Teach me. Show me the books, explain the contracts. If you can't go to town, I'll go. If you can't meet with buyers, I'll meet with them. I'm not going to sit around wringing my hands while the ranch falls apart." Caleb studied her for a long moment. "You do that? I just married you to save your daughter. You think I'm going to let your ranch collapse 3 weeks before the evaluation?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "No, I suppose not." So Eliza became more than the woman of the house. She became Caleb's proxy. She learned the ranch's finances, learned which buyers were reliable and which would cheat you blind. She rode into town with Tom to negotiate a timber contract, facing down men twice her size who assumed she could be bullied. She couldn't be. The first time she came back with a better deal than Caleb had gotten the previous year, Tom actually laughed. "Boss, I think you married a shark." Word spread. The men who dismissed her as just a convenient wife started looking at her differently, started asking her opinion on herd management, on pasture rotation, on supply orders, started treating her not as Caleb's shadow, but as a force in her own right. And Eliza discovered something she hadn't expected. She was good at this. Better than good. She had a head for numbers, an eye for detail, and a spine of steel when it came to protecting what was theirs. What was theirs? When had she started thinking of it that way? One evening, about 4 weeks after the accident, she sat with Caleb in his room going over the books. His arm was still in a sling, but the worst of the pain had faded. He could move around the house now, could sit at the desk and work. "The Henderson contract came through," Eliza said. "They'll take 500 head at $22 per." Caleb's eyebrows rose. 22? I was expecting 18. I told them we'd deliver a month early if they paid premium. They agreed. "Can we deliver a month early?" Tom says yes. We'll need to hire 3 extra hands for the drive, but even with their wages, we come out ahead. Caleb shook his head, something like wonder in his expression. "You've been doing this for a month." 4 weeks, technically. 4 weeks, and you've already renegotiated 3 contracts, streamlined the supply orders, and somehow convinced the feed supplier to give us a discount. He was overcharging. I showed him the numbers. "Eliza." Caleb set down his pen and looked at her directly. "You're not just helping anymore. You're running this place." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You're still the owner." "On paper, but in practice?" He gestured at the ledgers spread between them. "You've made decisions in 4 weeks that most ranch wives wouldn't touch in 4 years. The hands respect you, the buyers take you seriously, and the ranch is actually doing better than it was before I got hurt. Are you upset about that? No, I'm grateful. And I'm impressed. The word hung in the air between them. Eliza looked down at the ledgers, suddenly uncertain. I should check on May, she said, standing. Eliza, wait. She paused at the door. Thank you, Caleb said quietly, for everything. I know this wasn't what you signed up for. Neither was almost dying in the desert, but here we are. She left before he could say anything else. May was in her room, already in her nightgown, sitting by the window and watching the stars. She looked up when Eliza entered. Is Papa all right? He's fine, getting stronger every day. I'm glad you're taking care of him. And the ranch. Martha says you're better at the business than Papa is. Eliza smiled. Martha exaggerates. Does she? May patted the bed beside her. Come sit. Eliza sat, and May leaned against her shoulder. Do you like it here? May asked. Being married to Papa, living on the ranch? It was a complicated question. Eliza thought about the work, the responsibility, the constant threat of Victoria making another move. But she also thought about mornings watching the sun rise over the mountains, about the satisfaction of closing a good deal, about the way the ranch hands nodded to her with respect. Yes, she said honestly. I do. Good, because I like having you here. You make everything feel safer. Eliza kissed the top of May's head. That's what I'm here for. But that night, lying in her own bed, Eliza acknowledged the truth she'd been avoiding. This wasn't just a marriage of convenience anymore. She cared about this place, cared about the people who lived and worked here, cared about May with a fierceness that scared her. And Caleb, that was more complicated. She respected him, trusted him, had seen his strength and his vulnerability, had watched him love his daughter with everything he had seen the way he treated his workers with fairness, the way he shouldered responsibility without complaint. But respect wasn't love. Trust wasn't intimacy. They were partners in a business arrangement, nothing more. She told herself that firmly, believed it. Until the day the court evaluator arrived. He came without warning, which was apparently intentional. A thin man in a black suit carrying a leather satchel and a sour expression. His name was Mr. Wesley, and he made it clear from the start that he considered this assignment beneath him. I'll need to inspect the premises, he announced. The house, the grounds, the child's living conditions. I'll interview staff, and I'll speak privately with both Mr. and Mrs. Hart. Eliza's stomach tightened. This was it, the moment everything hung on. Wesley spent 3 hours going through the house room by room. He examined May's bedroom, her books, her clothes. He inspected the kitchen, the parlor, the storerooms. He asked Martha-pointed questions about household management, about May's daily routine, about whether there was evidence of drinking or violence or neglect. Martha answered each question with the truth, her voice steady and sure. Then Wesley interviewed May. Eliza and Caleb had to wait outside, listening to the murmur of voices through the door. When May finally emerged, she looked shaken but composed. What did he ask? Caleb asked gently. If I'm happy, if I'm scared, if you or Miss Eliza ever hurt me or yell at me, if I get enough to eat. May's lip trembled. I told him the truth, that I love you both, and I don't want to live anywhere else. Good girl, Eliza said, pulling her close. Then it was their turn. Wesley interviewed Caleb first, asking about his work schedule, his parenting philosophy, his plans for May's education. Caleb answered calmly, despite the tension visible in his shoulders. When Eliza's turn came, Wesley's questions were sharper. You married Mr. Hart quite suddenly, didn't you? Yes. Why? Because it was the right thing to do, for May and for the family. Family? Wesley's tone was skeptical. You've known Mr. Hart for less than 2 months. I've known him long enough to see the kind of man he is. And what kind is that? The kind who crawls through the desert to save his daughter. The kind who works himself to exhaustion to provide for the people who depend on him. The kind who deserves respect, not suspicion. Wesley made a note. Some would say this marriage is a sham, a legal maneuver to prevent Mrs. Ashford from gaining custody. Some would be wrong. Are you in love with Mr. Hart? The question caught her off guard. Eliza's mind raced. If she said yes, he'd assume she was lying. If she said no, he'd use it as proof the marriage was fraudulent. I'm committed to him, she said carefully. I'm committed to May. I'm committed to this family. Love takes many forms, Mr. Wesley. Ours might not look like a fairy tale, but it's real. Wesley studied her, his expression unreadable. Then he closed his notebook. I'll submit my report to Judge Harmon within the week. He'll make the final determination. He left without another word. That night, the household was subdued. No one knew if they'd passed the test. No one knew what Wesley would write in his report. Caleb sat in the parlor long after everyone else had gone to bed, staring into the fire. Eliza found him there, a glass of whiskey untouched on the table beside him. Can't sleep? She asked. Too much thinking. She sat down across from him. What did Wesley ask you? The same things he asked everyone else. Whether I'm fit to be a father. Whether this marriage is real. Caleb looked at her. I told him the truth. That you saved my life, saved May's life, and saved this family. That I'm grateful every day you're here. Is that what you really think? Yes. He said it simply, without hesitation. I know this isn't what you wanted. I know you agreed out of duty, out of compassion for May. But Eliza, you've become more than I ever expected, more than just a wife on paper. You've become the heart of this place. Eliza's throat tightened. Caleb, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I'm not expecting anything to change. I just wanted you to know. They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Outside, a coyote howled in the distance. The night pressed close around the house, full of uncertainty and waiting. Whatever Wesley decides, Eliza said finally, we face it together. Caleb met her eyes. Together. The week that followed Wesley's visit stretched like wire pulled too tight. Every sound made Eliza's heart jump. Was it a rider bringing news? Every knock at the door sent Caleb to his feet. May grew quieter, watching them both with worried eyes that understood more than a child should have to. On the 6th day, Carson arrived unannounced just after breakfast. His face was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. Eliza's hands stilled over the dishes she'd been washing. Caleb stood from the table, his jaw set. Judge Harmon made his decision, Carson said without preamble. He pulled a folded document from his coat pocket. Wesley's report was mixed. Mixed, Caleb repeated, the word tasting like ash. He acknowledged that May appears healthy, well cared for, properly educated. He noted the household is well managed and the ranch is profitable, but Carson paused and Eliza's stomach dropped. He questioned the authenticity of the marriage, called it convenient timing, said there was no evidence of genuine marital affection. What does that mean? Eliza asked, her voice sharper than she intended. It means Judge Harmon is ordering another hearing, 2 weeks from today. He wants to determine whether this marriage constitutes fraud. Carson's expression was grim. If he rules that it does, the original custody petition is back in play. Victoria gets another chance. The room spun. Eliza gripped the edge of the sink to steady herself. On what grounds can he claim fraud? Caleb demanded. We're legally married. We live together. We're raising May together. But you maintain separate bedrooms. You show no public displays of affection. According to Wesley's observations, you behave more like business partners than husband and wife. Carson looked between them. The judge wants to see proof this is a real marriage, not just a legal arrangement. That's absurd, Eliza said. Plenty of married couples don't... She stopped, heat rising in her cheeks. I know, Carson said gently. But Judge Harmon is under pressure. Victoria's husband has been making noise about judicial oversight, about protecting children from opportunistic women. His eyes met Eliza's. No offense intended. They're building a narrative, and right now, the evidence supports it. After Carson left, Caleb paced the parlor while Eliza stood frozen by the window. May had been sent outside with Martha, spared the details but not the tension that filled every corner of the house. We could tell the truth, Eliza said finally. Explain exactly why we married. Let the judge decide if protecting May was worth the unconventional arrangement. You heard Carson. They'll say I manipulated you, that you were vulnerable, homeless, desperate, that I took advantage. Caleb's voice was bitter. Victoria's already spreading that story. The judge will believe it because it fits the narrative about grieving widowers making poor decisions. Then what do we do? Caleb stopped pacing. He stood very still, his back to her. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. We could make it real. Eliza's heart stuttered. What? The marriage. We could make it real, not just on paper. He turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his expression nearly broke her. I'm not asking for love, Eliza. I'm not asking for something you can't give. But we could be partners. True partners. In every sense. I'm talking about sharing a life. Sharing a room, if necessary. Being a married couple, in fact, not just in name. He took a step toward her. I know it's not what either of us planned, but May needs us both, and maybe we need each other too. Eliza's throat was tight. She thought about the weeks since they'd married, the way they'd fallen into a rhythm, working together, making decisions together, building something neither of them had expected. The way Caleb made her coffee exactly how she liked it without asking. The way he listened when she talked about the ranch accounts, treating her opinions as equal to his own. The way her heart had started to speed up when she heard his footsteps in the hall. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I. I lost everything once. My husband, my son, my future. I barely survived it. Her voice cracked. I don't know if I can risk that kind of pain again. Caleb crossed the room to stand in front of her. He didn't touch her, but she felt the warmth of him, the solid presence that had become so familiar. I can't promise you won't get hurt, he said. I can't promise this will be easy. But Eliza, I can promise I'll fight for you the same way I fight for May. The same way you fought for both of us. He paused. You're not alone anymore, unless you want to be. She looked up at him, at the face she'd come to know so well, the eyes that held grief and hope in equal measure. And she made a choice. I don't want to be alone, she whispered. Something shifted in Caleb's expression. Relief, wonder, something deeper. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he raised his hand and cupped her cheek. His palm was warm and calloused against her skin. Then we do this together, he said. All of it. The hearing, the ranch, May, our life. We do it as husband and wife. For real this time. Eliza leaned into his touch. For real. When he kissed her, it was nothing like the chaste peck at their wedding. It was careful and questioning, an exploration and a promise all at once. Eliza's hands came up to grip his shirt, anchoring herself as the world tilted and reformed around them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing unsteadily, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. I should tell you something, he said, before we go any further. Eliza's pulse jumped. What? I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I have been since you stood on your porch with that rifle and refused to let me die in peace. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I didn't plan it, didn't want it, but it's true. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Caleb, you don't have to say it back. I'm not expecting. I'm falling in love with you too, she interrupted. The words tumbled out, terrifying and liberating at once. I didn't want to. I tried not to. But somewhere between the desert and the courtroom and learning to run this ranch, you became more than just May's father. You became mine. His arms came around her then, pulling her close. She buried her face in his chest, feeling his heart beating as fast as her own. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet parlor while outside the ranch went about its business, unaware that everything had just changed. That evening they told May together. The girl looked between them, her eyes widening with understanding and delight. Does this mean you're going to be married for real, like in the stories? Yes, Caleb said, smiling. For real. May launched herself at both of them, wrapping her small arms around them as far as they would reach. I knew it. I told Martha you were in love, but she said I was being silly, but I was right. Eliza laughed, the sound startled out of her. When was the last time she'd laughed like that? You're very smart, sweetheart. I know. May pulled back, suddenly serious. Does this mean Aunt Victoria can't take me away? It means we're going to make sure she can't, Caleb said. We're going to show the judge that we're a real family, Because we are. We always were, May said simply. Even before. That night, Eliza moved her things into Caleb's room. It felt strange and right all at once, hanging her dresses beside his shirts, setting her brush on the dresser next to his, sliding into bed beside him instead of lying alone in the dark. They talked late into the night, sharing stories they'd never had time for before. Caleb told her about growing up on the ranch, about his father's stern guidance and his mother's gentle wisdom, about meeting Sarah at a church social and knowing immediately she was the one, about the joy of May's birth and the devastation of Sarah's death. Eliza told him about Thomas, about their dreams of building a life together, about the brutal fever that took him, then their son, about the years in the cabin, surviving but not living, until the day she heard a child crying in the desert. I think Sarah would have liked you, Caleb said, his arm around her shoulders as she lay against his chest. She always said I needed someone who could stand up to me. And Thomas would have liked you, Eliza replied. He always said I needed someone who could match my stubbornness. They fell asleep like that, wrapped together, and for the first time in years, Eliza slept without nightmares. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Carson coached them on what to expect at the hearing. Martha helped Eliza select a dress that would project respectability and confidence. Tom made sure the ranch accounts were pristine and ready for inspection. But more than that, Eliza and Caleb built something real. They worked side by side during the day, made decisions together, presented a united front to the hands and the world. At night, they talked and laughed and learned each other's rhythms. The careful distance that had defined their early marriage melted away, replaced by genuine partnership and growing love. May blossomed under it all. The worry that had shadowed her eyes faded. She started laughing more, playing more, acting like the child she should have been all along. 3 days before the hearing, Victoria made her final move. Eliza was in town with Tom, meeting with the feed supplier when she saw the crowd gathered outside the general store. Women in fine dresses clustered together, their voices low and sharp. As Eliza approached, they fell silent, their eyes tracking her with cold assessment. One of them stepped forward, a woman Eliza recognized from the courthouse. Mrs. Winters, wife of the bank president and Victoria's closest friend. Mrs. Hart, she said, the title dripping with disdain. Or should I say Mrs. Crow? I hear you're having trouble deciding which name to use. Eliza kept her voice level. Is there something I can help you with, Mrs. Winters? Just wondering if you're aware of what people are saying about you and your convenient marriage. I don't concern myself with gossip. Don't you? Then perhaps you should. Mrs. Winters' smile was razor sharp. People are saying you seduced a grieving widower, that you manipulated your way into his home and his bed, that you're nothing but a gold digger using a child to secure your fortune. Heat flooded Eliza's face, but she held her ground. People can say whatever they like. The truth doesn't change. And what is the truth? That you went from living in a shack to running one of the biggest ranches in the territory in less than 3 months? That seems rather fortunate, doesn't it? That seems like a woman making the most of the opportunities she's given, Eliza said. Something you might understand if you'd ever worked a day in your life. Mrs. Winters' face flushed red. The other women gasped. But before anyone could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. Mrs. Hart is correct. Everyone turned. Mrs. Patterson, the schoolteacher, stood in the doorway of the store. She was a small woman, older, with kind eyes and steel in her spine. I've been teaching May Hart for weeks now, Mrs. Patterson continued. That child is thriving. She's bright, well-adjusted, and clearly loved by both her father and stepmother. Whatever gossip you're spreading, Mrs. Winters, it has no basis in fact. You're being paid by the Harts, Mrs. Winters snapped. Of course you'd defend them. I'm paid to teach, not to lie. And I'm telling you that May Hart has a good home with parents who care for her. If you can't accept that, perhaps it's because your friend Mrs. Ashford has poisoned your perception. Mrs. Patterson turned to Eliza. Pay them no mind, dear. Some people have nothing better to do than tear down what they can't have. Eliza felt her throat tighten with gratitude. Thank you. That evening, she told Caleb what had happened. His face darkened with anger. Victoria's making this personal now, attacking your reputation. Let her, Eliza said. We know the truth. The people who matter know the truth. That's what counts. Is it? Caleb's jaw was tight. Eliza, I've dragged you into this mess. Your name is being dragged through the mud because of me. No, because of her. Eliza took his hand. And I'd do it again, every single part of it, because at the end of it all, I got you and May. That's worth any amount of gossip. The day of the hearing arrived cold and clear. They dressed carefully, Caleb in his best suit, Eliza in a dark blue dress that Martha had altered to fit perfectly. May wore white, looking solemn and young. The courthouse was packed. It seemed like half the town had turned out, drawn by scandal and spectacle. Victoria sat in the front row on the left, her expression triumphant. Mrs. Winters and her friends filled the rows behind her, but on the right side Eliza saw Martha, Dutch, Tom, and a dozen ranch hands in their best clothes. She saw Mrs. Patterson. She saw the feed supplier they'd negotiated with, the timber buyer, several merchants from town, people who knew them, who'd worked with them, who'd seen the truth of their marriage. Judge Harmon entered and the room fell silent. He looked older than he had 3 months ago, more worn. He settled into his chair and surveyed the courtroom. We're here to address allegations of marriage fraud, he began. Mrs. Victoria Ashford claims that the marriage between Caleb Hart and Eliza Crow was a legal sham designed to circumvent this court's custody evaluation. Mrs. Ashford, your evidence? Victoria's lawyer stood. For the next hour, he presented his case. Testimony from women who claimed Eliza had seduced Caleb, financial records suggesting she'd taken control of the ranch, Wesley's report noting the lack of marital affection, character witnesses who questioned Eliza's motives. It was brutal. It was thorough. It painted Eliza as a calculating opportunist who'd trapped a grieving man. When it was Carson's turn, he stood slowly. Your Honor, this case isn't about marriage fraud. It's about a vindictive woman who can't accept that she lost custody of her niece. Mrs. Ashford has waged a campaign of harassment and sabotage against the Hart family for months. She's spread lies, damaged property, and attacked Mrs. Hart's character. Why? Because she wants to win. Not because she cares about May, but because she can't stand to lose. He called witnesses, ranch hands who testified to the sabotage, merchants who spoke of Eliza's business acumen and fair dealing, Mrs. Patterson who described May's happiness and progress. Then he called Caleb to the stand. Mr. Hart, did you marry Eliza Crow to defraud this court? No, sir. Why did you marry her? Caleb looked at Eliza, and the love in his eyes was unmistakable. I married her because she saved my daughter's life, because she's the strongest, most capable woman I've ever met, because she makes me want to be a better man and a better father, and because I love her. When did you fall in love with her? I'm not sure there was a single moment. Maybe it was when she pointed a rifle at me and told me to get off her porch. Maybe it was when she gave up her last water to save May. Maybe it was when she stood up to Victoria's men without flinching. He smiled slightly. Or maybe it was all of those moments together. But I know I love her now, and I'll love her the rest of my life. Murmurs ran through the courtroom. Victoria's face was white with rage. Then Carson called Eliza. She walked to the stand on shaking legs, placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. She sat down and looked at Carson, at the packed courtroom, at May's small, worried face. Mrs. Hart, did you marry Caleb for his money? No. For security? For a home? No. Then why? Eliza's voice was steady. I married him because May needed a mother and I needed a purpose. Because I'd spent 3 years surviving alone and I was tired of just surviving. Because he offered me a chance to be part of something bigger than my own grief. She paused. I married him out of duty, but I stayed out of love. You love him? Yes, more than I thought I could love anyone after my first husband died. Caleb Hart is a good man, a devoted father, and the best partner I could have asked for. Our marriage might have started as convenience, but it became real. It is real. Carson nodded. No further questions. Victoria's lawyer stood for cross-examination. His questions were sharp, probing, designed to trap her, but Eliza had lived through worse than courtroom games. She answered each question truthfully, refused to be rattled, held her ground. Finally, he ran out of ammunition and sat down. I'd like to call one more witness, Carson said. May Hart. The courtroom stirred. Judge Harmon frowned. The child has already testified. I know, Your Honor, but she has the right to speak about her own future, and I think you should hear what she has to say. The judge considered, then nodded. Very well. May walked to the stand, so small she needed a cushion to be seen properly. She looked terrified, but determined. May, Carson said gently, do you understand what's happening today? Yes, sir. Aunt Victoria is trying to take me away from Papa and Mama Eliza. Eliza's heart stopped. Mama Eliza. May had never called her that before. Do you want to live with your aunt? No, sir. Why not? May's voice was clear and firm. Because she doesn't love me. She just wants to win. But Papa loves me. And Mama Eliza loves me. They take care of me and teach me and make me feel safe. That's what families do. But May, Carson said carefully, your father and Eliza haven't been married very long. How do you know they really love each other? May looked at him like he'd asked a very silly question. Because I see it every day. The way Papa makes Mama coffee in the morning. The way Mama fixes Papa's collar before he goes to town. The way they hold hands when they think I'm not looking. The way they talk to each other and smile at each other and work together. Her voice grew stronger. My real Mama is gone. I miss her every day. But Mama Eliza isn't trying to replace her. She's just loving me the way my real Mama would have wanted. And she loves Papa, and he loves her. Anyone with eyes can see it. The courtroom was utterly silent. Thank you, May, Carson said softly. That's all. May climbed down and ran to Eliza, who pulled her into her arms, tears streaming down her face. Judge Harmon sat back in his chair. He looked at Victoria, at Caleb and Eliza, at May clinging to the woman she called Mama. I've heard enough, he said. Mrs. Ashford, your petition is denied. The marriage between Caleb and Eliza Hart is legitimate and lawful. May Hart will remain in her father's custody. Furthermore, I am issuing a restraining order. You are not to approach the Hart property or contact May without explicit permission from her legal guardians. If you violate this order, you will be held in contempt. He banged his gavel. This case is closed. The courtroom erupted. Victoria stood, her face twisted with fury, screaming about corruption and injustice. Her lawyer tried to calm her, but she shoved him away and stormed out, her supporters scattering in her wake. Caleb swept May into his arms. Eliza stood on shaking legs as Martha and the ranch hands crowded around, congratulating them, celebrating. Carson shook Caleb's hand, then Eliza's. Congratulations, Mrs. Hart, he said, smiling. You're officially a family. Outside the courthouse, the autumn sun was bright and warm. Caleb set May down, and the girl immediately grabbed both their hands. Can we go home now? She asked. Eliza looked at Caleb. Home. Yes, that's what it was. Not just a ranch or a house, but home. Yes, sweetheart, Caleb said. Let's go home. The weeks that followed were the happiest Eliza had known in years. Victoria disappeared from their lives. Rumor had it she and her husband had moved to Denver, unable to face the humiliation of their defeat. The ranch flourished under their joint management. May thrived, growing more confident and joyful with each passing day. But more than that, Eliza and Caleb built a marriage that was real in every sense. They worked together during the day, made love at night, raised May together, faced challenges as partners. The careful distance of their early arrangement had been replaced by genuine intimacy and deep love. One evening in early spring, almost a year after Eliza had first found them in the desert, she stood on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. May was inside doing her lessons. Caleb came out and wrapped his arms around her from behind. What are you thinking about? He asked. About how different everything is from a year ago. How I was alone and empty and just trying to survive another day. And now? Eliza turned in his arms and looked up at him. Now I have everything. A husband I love. A daughter who calls me Mama. A home. A purpose. A future. Caleb kissed her forehead. We have something else too. What's that? A new beginning for all of us. He was right. The drought that had nearly killed them had also brought them together. The fight that had tested them had made them stronger. And the love that had grown between them, unexpected, unplanned, but undeniably real, had given them all something worth fighting for. Papa, Mama Eliza, May's voice called from inside. Come look, I finished my arithmetic. They smiled at each other, then went inside together, hand in hand. Later that night, after May had gone to bed, Eliza found a letter on the desk in Caleb's study. It was in Martha's handwriting, addressed to both of them. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a proposal. Martha wanted to use part of the ranch to create a refuge for women escaping difficult situations, women like Eliza had been, alone and desperate and needing a second chance. Eliza showed it to Caleb. He read it carefully, then looked at her. "What do you think?" She thought about the cabin where she'd nearly died, about the loneliness and despair that had defined those years, about the chance she'd been given to build something new. "I think we should do it," she said. "I think we should give other women what this ranch gave me. Hope." So they did. Over the months that followed, they converted the old bunkhouse into living quarters, hired staff, spread the word. Women came, some alone, some with children, all carrying stories of loss and hardship and survival. Eliza worked with each one, helping them learn skills, find their strength, plan their futures. Some stayed a few months and moved on. Others settled in the area, started businesses, built new lives. The ranch became known not just for its cattle and timber, but for the second chances it offered. May grew up surrounded by strong women who'd overcome impossible odds. She learned that survival wasn't weakness, that asking for help wasn't failure, that starting over took more courage than giving up. And years later, when May was grown and the ranch had helped hundreds of women find their feet again, people would ask Eliza how it all started. She would smile and say, "It started with heat and desperation, with a little girl crying in the desert and a man crawling through dust to save her." But it became something more. It became proof that even in the harshest drought, even in the deepest grief, something beautiful could grow. It became home.